listening to Faith in Action with Matthew Nowlin. I'm excited for our guest today, Pastor and Representative John DeBerry of District 90. Representative, welcome into the show. I'm glad you're here today.
Thank you for having me today. I appreciate the opportunity to come and to talk with your listeners, and I'm excited about being here.
This is only the second time that I've met you. The first time was last fall when we had Senator Mark Pody in discussing his abortion bill, and you led the Pledge of Allegiance, if I recall correctly.
Yes, I did.
That was a great night. That piece of legislation didn't get passed, but I certainly appreciated your support on that, and I know Senator Pody did as well. But you've had an interesting, I think to say the least, experience recently with the party that you were a member of for 25 years. You've probably been a member of for longer.
Yeah, since 1969.
What happened?
Well, there is a board, a tribunal. They are called the Executive Committee, I believe, or the committee that is over the ballot or who goes on the ballot. And they made a decision that because of beliefs that I have and stands that I have made, according to them over the years, disqualify me to use the term Democrat. And because of this, they made a decision and voted overwhelmingly to vote that even after I had qualified as a Democrat by the members of my community and my district signing my petition, as they have done for 13 times as a Democrat, and though I was elected by my colleagues as an officer in a Democratic delegation and Democratic delegation there at the House, that I was no longer qualified to be a Democrat. Basically, if I did not believe in certain things and say certain things and vote in certain ways, then it would not be tolerated. And they, even after I had qualified, they put me off the ballot. And basically, had it not been for action of the legislature and our governor, I would be still off the ballot and would have had to mount a write-in campaign, which is virtually almost impossible in our current system. But that is the reason why I'm back on the ballot as an independent.
That's still for District 90.
That's still for District 90, and the people of District 90 will get a chance to voice their opinion. Even if they don't re-vote me in, if they don't re-elect me, it's still their right to make that statement that they want a new representative, and it is not that tribunal's responsibility to do it for them.
When I think about representative democracy, I always go back to the first chapter of Deuteronomy, where we see that first example where you're to select men from among you, wise, experienced, with wisdom, good judgment. The idea of a committee coming in and interposing themselves between that representative and the people just strikes me as unbiblical and un-American.
It's one of many dangerous trends that are happening in our nation right now. And I think that because of the blindness, the greed, the cluelessness of many of our elected and appointed officials, they are unable to have the vision that they need to look down the road, not just at today, not at what's happening this moment, not at the events of this moment, but how what we do today will affect the life of this nation 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road, when many of us will be gone and our children will be trying to maintain a country. I think that what we're doing right now is undermining this democracy. We're undermining this experiment that the world calls democracy, which America was the first to perfect. And with all of our fears, faults, failures, fallacies, and flaws, we still were the folks who demonstrated our faith, and we changed the world. And I think that we need to open our eyes and realize how much we have been blessed.
Did you change, or did your party change?
Well, To answer that question, I guess I have to give you a little quick walk through my history as a child and the DeBerry family. My father was the president of the NAACP in Crockett County, where we moved from Memphis to that small town, which is a wonderful small town up in West Tennessee. We integrated the schools in 1968. I was meeting with some of the folks I went to school with just this past evening. One gentleman even brought me a almost brand new copy of the annual of our graduation book there, and for me to look at. And basically, I have a background where I was taught that we are more similar than we are different. That is the way I was brought up. I know, of course, I'm one of those individuals who rode on the back of the bus, went to a segregated school, drank water out of a colored water fountain. I mean, if you want to find reasons to have resentment and hatred, then it's those of my generation. But my generation was taught and raised to not just persevere, but to overcome and to build bridges and not walls. That's what we were taught. My father marched when Dr. King was in town. We marched with Dr. King. I was there when he made his last speech. So I say all of that to simply say, as a Democrat, as a civil rights worker, as a civil rights advocate, as my father and mother were. My mother campaigned against abortion when they were trying to pass abortion in the late 60s. My mother was one of those people who went around to churches and spoke against it. So when did these issues become Democratic issues? Because they weren't when I was young. They weren't when my father and mother was alive. So I didn't change. The party changed. And those issues that we stood for back then, as my father was a gospel preacher, taught me to be a gospel preacher since I was 15 years old. We've spoken against these issues consistently ever since I was a child. So I haven't changed anything. I have never supported abortion. I have always supported the biblical standard of ethics and morality. I have always said that God, not man, not the government, created marriage. I have always taught these things, have always stood here. So if I didn't change, somebody changed, and it must have been the party.
This separation from the party to go independent, are there any issues that will cause you to feel freer on, perhaps, and change, or are you just going to keep on being Representative DeBerry from 1995?
Well, basically, there are a lot of good people in Nashville. There are, of course, good people on both sides of the aisle. But what I have found from my colleagues who stood firm and passed this legislation that I can be an independent, I found a lot of my colleagues in the party that I was not in who supported what I stood for. And because of this, I feel the freedom to work back and forth across the aisle. Mm-hmm. We've got to build a consensus. We cannot just simply divide this country. I remember as a child when Khrushchev, and I'm much older than you are, but Khrushchev made it very plain back in the Kennedy era, back in the time of the Cold War, that they were going to take America without firing a shot. And this was known, I remember from our weekly reader discussions from our teachers, that we understood who the enemy was and what the enemy intended to do. What the enemy intended to do was take our country, to take it away from us, to divide us, and make us destroy ourselves from within. And the Lord said it before Abraham Lincoln said it, and that is that a house divided against itself cannot stand. What we see happening today is exactly the game plan of those who are our enemies looking greedily from the outside with a 100-year plan, who are waiting for us to destroy our way of life so that they can take it away from us. And we're walking right into the trap.
Why is it so hard, do you think, for some people to see what's happening?
Because they're blinded by their own agendas. They have retreated to their own silos, to their own places, right and left, unfortunately, some of them. And they can't see that at some point in time, everybody can profit if nobody's just necessarily is concerned about who gets all the credit for it. What we have to do, you spoke about Mark Pody and the bill that he brought forth last year when we first met. He's the type of gentleman, him and many like him, when they come there, they come with an agenda of trying to right some of the wrongs that have happened, to change some of the things that we have codified and made law. Since 1973, we have taken the lives of over 70 million, if my understanding, and that might be conservative, over 70 million souls have been destroyed, thrown away like garbage because it didn't happen from popular vote. It didn't happen from the states. It didn't happen from the people. It happened from a tribunal, from a board, from the Supreme Court that makes a decision about who lives and who dies. And why does that happen? It happens when in a democracy, the people lose control. When the people are not able to control the politics, the vision, and the direction of the country, all of us lose. And that's what we see happening right now.
Is party leadership in either party totally insulated like that as well? Or
Well, I think when you ignore the voice and the will of the people, this is what happens. And we see it happening all over the nation, where the voice and will of the people is being ignored. Many folks don't realize that the state of California, we often call it La La Land, but on 3 separate occasions, they voted against gay marriage. They voted against it on 3 separate occasions, but still, it is passed. Why? Because when you have an insulated group, as you say, that does not have to face the people, and I'm not advocating some massive change and adding to the Supreme Court and all of this. What I'm saying is what the people have to do is elect officials who will hold everybody in all 3 branches of government, hold everybody accountable to the will of the people. When they're not held accountable to the will of the people, then they can acquiesce to the will of the few. And that's where these bad laws have come from.
What are you most excited about right now going on in District 90? There's some good things happening. There's probably some areas that need help, but what are you excited about?
I'm excited about the fact that there are a lot of folks who were offended by what the executive board of the Democratic Party did. They basically say this does not represent them. They've elected me 13 times and have known what my beliefs, my faith, and what I stand for. They've known this over and over. My opponents for the last 3 elections have stood out in the street and made it very plain. They have done mail-outs. They've done demonstrations in the street. They have connected me with the president, sending out mailers saying DeBerry and Donald, too conservative, too dangerous. So nobody is unaware of what I believe, what I stand, my faith, that I'm a minister, that I don't believe in much of this progressive agenda. So nobody's unaware of it. I'm excited about the fact that folks called and urged me to find a way to get back on the ballot, and that there are people who are finally opening their eyes and realizing that there is, if you please, a movement to gradually chip away at their rights as citizens, chip away at their rights as voters. And what will happen is eventually we lose our republic, we lose our democracy. So we've got to become vocal about these things.
What issues are there in your district that you'd like to go back for another chance to continue to make changes, or new issues that have arisen that you'd like to see changes made on?
Well, one of the things that I've worked on the entire time I have been there in the legislature, I have worked to take care of our children and our families. We have rewritten the laws on custody, on abuse. I chaired the Children and Family Committee for 12 years. And during those 12 years, we basically rewrote many of the laws that take care and protect our children, our families, our women, our fathers, our mothers, and that's important. What do you elect people for? We're not there just to style, smile, and profile. We are there to help make their lives better. Not only this, education. The schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline in Memphis is wide open, where we're sending more children to jail than we are to college. We graduate children after 12 years and $125,000 to $50,000 investment who can't read on a third grade level. That is unacceptable, because then that child, regardless of his efforts, has been failed by all of us. And then we have them not in the school system, but now they're in the criminal justice system. Either way it goes, we're spending money on them for the remainder of their lives. And I think we need to put more attention to making sure that parents and children have all the resources they need to see that these kids are educated properly.
I have an aunt and uncle who were involved through Central Church in a program where they went into a disadvantaged school. In second grade, as it was when I believe they worked with them, as it was explained to me, is that by the time a student reaches the fourth grade, they look at their literacy level, and that's how the state plans 10 years out for the number of prison beds.
Oh, yeah.
It will need based on the. Is that true to your?
I have heard that, and I understand that to be true. And if you're going to look at these logarithms and metrics to make decisions on budgets 5, 10, 15, and 20 years down the road, what better indicator is there than an individual who can't make a living, who can't read, who can't pass the make a decent grade on the ACT, who can't pass the test to become a buck private in the Army, who can't pass the test to go to anybody's school. What better indicator that you've got an individual who at some point in time is going to have to make a decision to maybe go in and do something that is illegal and not right in order to feed themselves. And that's not an excuse. We know that there are a lot of different factors and a lot of blame can be passed around. But as a legislator, my job is to try to mitigate that, and that's what we hope to do.
Defunding the police is the rage in Memphis right now. It's the rage in Nashville right now. It's my understanding it's the rage in Chattanooga right now. And talking about these insulated groups, you have the Gamaliel Foundation, which was started by Saul Alinsky in 1968, that has 3 chapters in Memphis that I'm aware of. Micah in Memphis, they have Noah in Nashville, and they have Caleb in Chattanooga. What is the consensus in your district about the police in general?
I think my district is calling for changes in the police department that you would call for in any other area of life, whether it's education, academia, if it's in the medical field, and that is to find, identify, and weed out those who do not follow their oath and who do not keep their commitment to the people. The people in my district that I've talked to think that it is absolutely insane to say defund the police department because they understand that regardless of some of the issues that we've had and some of the problems that we've had African-American mayors in this city for decades. We've had African-American police directors. We've had African-Americans who have been the head of the city council, the county commission, African-American city mayors, county mayors, African-American officials. We've had at several occasions in Memphis where everybody that could perfect a contract in Shelby County were black, were African Americans. So what we got to do is take an introspective examination. We've got to look within ourselves. We've got to look within our communities, and we've got to ask ourselves some serious questions about some of the things that we make claims about. Yes, the things that we saw happen here recently that set off all of this were egregious. They were a shame, and all of us condemn it. Any civilized individual, faith individual who believes in the Word of God, condemn what happened. But here again, what is justice in America? Do we give people baseball bats and let them go and beat the person up and kill their family and kill their children and stone them in a valley like they did Achan? What's justice in America? Justice in America is that that person be held accountable, that that person be brought to court, that that person is convicted, tried, convicted, and then jailed and punished to the fullest extent of the law. That's the way we do it in America. We are not a banana republic. That's the way we do it in America. That said, then what all of us have got to do is say, yes, that's egregious. But the child that was shot in his stroller, that's egregious. The child that was in his car seat, shot in the back of his head, that's egregious. A friend of mine that was walking to the mailbox and shot in the stomach and eventually died as somebody robbed him of his wallet, that's egregious. Little old ladies who are beaten and robbed in their yards, that's egregious. We can see all types of behavior that is egregious, that is uncivilized, that it goes against our culture, our society, and our laws. And while we deal with these policemen who violate their oath of office, politicians who violate their oath of office, let's also be visual of the fact and be cognizant, rather, of the fact that we make our society safe when we hold everybody accountable, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of who they are and where they live, that we hold everybody accountable for violating the law.
And that is biblical.
That's biblical.
We see that in the Pentateuch, where it says, show no partiality to the poor or to the rich.
Right.
We see it in James. And I think one thing, Virgil Walker and Darrell Harris, two dear brothers in the Lord who have a great podcast called Just Thinking. They're African-American brothers, and they say that America doesn't really have a racism problem anymore. America has a partiality problem.
Well, we got to use some common sense. We can't claim to be Christians and believe the Bible and the biblical account of creation with Adam and Eve, the biblical account of the flood with Noah and his family, meaning that the same blood, the same DNA runs through all of us. Color prejudice is somewhere around 500 or 600 years old. I may be wrong on that number, but there was no color prejudice in the scriptures. And what we've got to stop doing, several things. Number one, we've got to judge things by the time that we live in. We got to judge men by the time. I cannot rightfully judge a man that lived 300, 400, 500 years ago when there was no democracy on the planet. That every nation was a monarchy and the king had the power of life and death. I cannot judge men who lived in that era by 2020 standards. And what we need to do is get a grip, protect our country, keep what we've got and not lose it with blind prejudice, partiality, racism, crazy politics, and just give up the greatest nation ever created. Just give it up because of these foolish pursuits. And we've got to think a lot about these things.
Representative DeBerry, how can folks get a hold of you, and how can folks help with your campaign or et cetera?
We're trying to kind of lay low during the primary. There are 3 young people who the folks have a chance to look at. They will determine who I will run against in November. But John DeBerry, JRJ.DeBerry at hotmail.com is my current email. Aaron Cozort and Sharon Epps, who are coordinating my campaign at the moment, will be developing websites and places to donate. So those will be coming soon. But at this particular time, JRJ.DeBerry at hotmail.com, and you can contact us.
Thank you. You will be in our prayers, and we so greatly appreciate you coming in the studio this morning.
Thank you.